11th, 2023, and this is another video brought to you guys by the Youth Political Activism Club. Today we're going to be talking about everything related to the State of the Union Address 2023. We're going to be talking about Biden's address, drama before, during, and after his speech, the GOP response, and much, much more. So make sure you stay tuned for the entire video to get a full picture of what happened during the State of the Union. So just diving into some background of the State of the Union, it really began or evolved into the thing that we know it as today during the 1920s or 1940s. There are different sources, and since it's an evolving event, we really can't pinpoint where exactly it started as the thing we know it as today, but somewhere in the first half of the 20th century. And then the overall idea of the president giving a speech to primarily Congress and updating them on the State of the Union began in early America in 1790 or so. So it's been a long-standing American tradition. Obviously, it happens annually, and it's very important for a president to give a full speech, a powerful speech, a moving speech to the nation, especially if they are a first-term president and are looking, as all presidents are, for a second term. It's important that they address issues that the nation is currently involved with, what really is on America's mind, hitting all those points that are important while also being a good communicator and effective and have some passion in their speech. So, on to the speech itself. Biden spent about half his speech time talking primarily about the economy. He talked about inflation, which has obviously been a major part of his administration thus far and will remain something of his legacy, I believe. Inflation obviously reached its peak in around May or June, and since then it's been going down steadily, but still inflation is higher than we want it to be. It's currently at 6.5% when we usually want it, and the Fed wants it to be at 2%, which is, means when it's at 2%, it means that the country is having economic growth, but it's still not super high inflation where Americans are having to pay double or triple for groceries that they usually have to do, where gas prices are through the roof. But obviously everything has been coming down, and Biden did highlight that in his speech, saying how inflation has been going down. He talked about the number of jobs that have been created, the unemployment rate, and a lot of different other factors. But overall, what to keep in mind with the economy, and just as an overarching theme, not just for Biden, but for other presidents as well, is that presidential policy rarely has any impact on the economy. The economy goes up and down as a result of Americans themselves and, different business decisions, all this, and there's more to it than just one person signing a bill into law or doing one thing. And so there's so many other different factors, both international and domestic, that go into the American economy. So no president can primarily, or even at all, be fully responsible or take the credit of the economy. You can't blame them, nor can they take credit when it's good. So that's one thing to keep in mind about the economy, is that even when a president talks about certain achievements that have been going on under their administration, or other people blame them for things that go on under their administration, it's not fully their fault, nor is it fully because of them. So that's on the economy. Biden also talked about a multitude of different things, including law enforcement. Biden actually invited, I don't know where it says it here, if they even have a picture, but Biden invited the parents of Tyre Nichols. There it is. It's a really moving moment, having them there to symbolize something that has been ongoing in America, especially since 2020 and the George Floyd protests, and really when BLM started to be more of a culturally relevant thing, or take a spotlight in American culture wars and everything. And so I know I like keeping my opinion off of here, but I thought it was very nice of him to invite them there and have them there and be a part of his speech. He talked about law enforcement and the situation with Tyre Nichols for a while, and so a very important part of his speech that he highlighted there. And again, what I was talking about earlier about how they make sure to have things that are relevant to what the country is going through right now, and I think it was January 30th or 31st or something like that when Tyre Nichols was killed, so very relevant to the situation and the time. Just to expand further on the law enforcement point, talking about the unfortunate event with Nichols and how that shouldn't have happened, but also giving law enforcement their part in the speech as well. And he said something that actually got both sides to stand up, and not just when he talked about Tyre, but when he said that he thought the majority of law enforcement are good, solid people. And at that point, I think everyone in the House rose up and clapped. Because that's something that both sides can agree on, is that law enforcement as an institution do have their flaws, but overall the people that wear the badge overall are good people that want to protect us and serve our country. But then he also highlighted how there needs to be more training, not going along with the defund the police thing. But I think overall Biden has always been consistent with his idea of not defunding the police, but rather investing more into them to make sure that they have racial sensitivity training, and that's kind of what he echoed on Tuesday as well. Biden also talked about China, with the balloon. He didn't talk about this for long. I don't know why it's the third slide on here. But it was really brief what he said about China. He just talked about the balloon, how he thought that was a really effective response that he made, obviously provoking applause on the left, while the right just sat there and thought that, repeated the things that they usually say about China, in that we need to make sure at all costs that they remain second place or further down, and that we need to always remain on the offensive and never defensive. And when we're on the defensive, that's a sign that we're behind in some way. So that's kind of what the situation with China was. Also, we do have a video on the balloon. It's both on TikTok and YouTube Shorts if you want to check that out, explaining the whole situation with that. But that's it for China, really. And then, again, this was very brief. I don't think that Biden spent much time at all on abortion, but, just saying that if a bill were to come on his desk wanting to codify Roe v. Wade into law, then he would happily pass it. And again, applause along party lines, as usual. But, he didn't talk much about Roe v. Wade. The deficit, so the deficit Biden talked about. I think that McCarthy and Biden had a meeting about the deficit a few weeks ago or so, and he really, with this part of his speech, he was trying to explain how he wants McCarthy and other House Republicans to raise the debt limit, how he thought it was necessary. And he echoed that during previous administrations, without any concessions or agreements or challenges, the deficit was raised over and over again. And even last year it was raised without any controversy. And so it should be raised because, and here they're highlighting Janet Yellen, this was really a call to action to the House GOP and telling them that they need to step up to raise the deficit before we have to default on our debt, which would cause grave economic issues. Hopefully, and again, this is my opinion, but hopefully they do reach some sort of conclusion before June when we have to default on a deficit, because if we do default, then all hell breaks loose. Next was healthcare. This was also, I think, somewhat minor. He focused on healthcare much more so than Roe v. Wade or China. With healthcare, he was talking about insulin costs, about Medicare, Medicaid, and this was really where the biggest controversy during the speech came. Basically, at this point, Biden was talking about healthcare, Medicare, Medicaid. He went into the Social Security aspect of it all, and he brought to light, or rather brought to attention, the fact that some Senate Republicans want to see Medicare and Social Security sunset, and he brought that to light, and obviously it provoked an extreme reaction from the House Republicans, or to the Republicans. Marjorie Taylor Greene screamed liar. You've probably seen this all over the news. Liar is an interesting thing because, as the article highlights here, Joe Wilson of South Carolina yelled, "You lie," at Barack Obama's 2009 address, and he apologized profusely afterwards. There was a whole House committee saying how he needed to be condemned for that. I don't think Marjorie Taylor Greene will suffer the same consequences, since at that time the House was a Democratic House, and I don't think Kevin McCarthy is going to even try to get Marjorie Taylor Greene, or even make it seem like Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to suffer consequences for shouting liar. But it is true. Both Senators Rick Scott and Ron Johnson, Rick Scott from Florida and Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, have plans for Social Security and Medicare to take a backpedal in government funding. Rick Scott has a plan where every 5 years, Medicare and Social Security would need to be voted on in order for it to remain. And so every 5 years, they would revisit it. And of course, with that, his plan is more so for when there is a Republican-held majority for Medicare and Social Security to be done with. And then Ron Johnson's plan is somewhat on the more extreme side, where he wants it to be revisited every single year. So both of them do have these plans. It was true what Biden said. There's also infrastructure. He talked briefly about this, but I think that there's a lot of consensus on this side on the both like infrastructure and economic supply chain, all of them wrapped into one. There's consensus on that because Biden really talked about in this part of his speech about bringing jobs back to America and making sure that the supply chain of America starts in America rather than somewhere overseas. And so that got applause from both sides, really putting the America First policy in a more democratic way and bringing it over to the Democrats. And I think that this will be a very important part of his speech or of his campaign and platform if he does decide to run, which if he does, it's speculated that he's going to announce a re-election campaign in the spring. So look out for that, but we'll certainly make a video updating you guys if that does happen. But anyways, the whole America First and jobs and all that, he did miss some context in his speech when he was saying certain things about that, but nevertheless, this policy overall of the supply chain starting in America is a thing that, as you can see, both sides of the aisle are standing up. Even McCarthy's clapping here, and so it's really something that he does need to continue if he does want any chance of winning in 2024, is making sure that he appeals to lower-class Americans, to blue-collar workers, and talking about bringing more jobs to America from overseas and making sure that everything starts in America. He also talked about, I'll have to find exactly his wording, but he talked about how he signed something into law where the materials for building either bridges or something like that, how all the materials need to be made in America. And so, that certainly settled well with blue-collar folks. And then immigration, this is also a somewhat minor part, and also one that sparked controversy when immigration kind of tied into the drug trade in our southern border, and Biden highlighted a man whose daughter died of a drug overdose. I think it was from fentanyl. When he talked about this part of the speech, Republicans got very passionate again, and they yelled that it was because of him that the drug trade was bad, that he was failing America. And then the GOP response. So in the GOP response, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who was the White House press secretary from 2017 to 2019, she, who is now the governor of Arkansas, surprisingly, actually did not know about this prior to Tuesday night. But in her speech, she talked about the flaws in Biden's speech. She didn't say anything too specific about his speech. It was more of an overall blow to Democrats. Some things that were missing from Biden's speech was certainly Afghanistan. He didn't talk about that at all, since that was probably one of the most controversial things that he's done during his presidency. He talked, I think, only very briefly about Ukraine and Russia, since, again, he hasn't really had successes there. And then, overall, I already talked about how with the economy, it's not really the president's place to take credit for that, nor to be blamed for the economy. But nevertheless, he did bring out statistics that are positive to talk about how well the economy is doing and make it seem like as if it's his. And then now on the more humorous side of things, more into the drama of what happened during the State of the Union. So one thing, obviously, Marjorie Taylor Greene screaming out liar and making a show of things there. Her outfit was kind of so attention-seeking. I compared it to the woman in 101 Dalmatians, Kirsten Sinema, if you guys happen to see her as well. She was in a lot of those clips when they're going around and panning the Senate floor. Yes, right there in the yellow, hiding behind whoever that is, but she's very bright. There are comparisons of her to Big Bird or Tweety Bird. There she is, yes. Her outfit was rather funny, though she always seems to be coming in a fashion forward or fashion statement. She has that signature purple wig that she's always wearing. Again, this isn't important stuff I'm talking about right now. It's just the more funny, humorous, lighthearted things of the speech. Overall, Biden seemed pleased with his speech the day after. He gave another interview talking about his speech and saying that he was proud of it. He also brought evidence forward about Rick Scott and Ron Johnson's plan about Medicare and Social Security. So he brought evidence for those the day after. One thing that I also wanted to bring to light was how energetic and combative he seemed during his speech. Obviously, he's known as being confused sometimes. Sleepy Joe is what they call him. Again, here we're hearing more into the opinion subjective side of things rather than fact-based stuff, and just more talking about the public's perception of him. But last night, it seemed that there's a consensus among most media sources and independents specifically that he did do a good job. He was combative, he was humorous at times, he made jokes, he was able to negotiate right on the Senate floor, or rather the chamber floor, with Republicans on Medicare and Social Security, saying that once they erupted, that he was like, oh, you guys don't want to see the sunset? Okay, great, we have a consensus. Fantastic. I love conversion, which is roots to his Catholic religion, but anyways, he did do a good job, as most media sources say, since it was the first time in a while that we saw him be this energetic and, quite frankly, awake. The exchange between Mitt Romney and George Santos, this was probably the most humorous part of the night for me. Mitt Romney is known as probably the most honest person in Congress. He's honest, he's Mormon, he has this religious background. And then there's George Santos, who, as everyone knows, is the liar-in-chief of the House of Representatives and of Congress. Mitt Romney thought that George Santos should be at the back, instead of parading around, which he was. George Santos was going around, shaking hands with everyone, making discussion. He's waiting to talk with the president, and Mitt Romney thought that that was rather inappropriate. He shouldn't be parading around, and rather should be just sitting in the back, minding his own business, not trying to take any attention or be the center of anything. They have different moral standards here, though I think George Santos has different moral standards than pretty much everyone else in Congress. And so something that George Santos actually rebuked on Twitter was that, hey, Mitt Romney, just a reminder that you will never be president, making a jab at his 2012 failure of a presidential run. And then afterwards, there's obviously Republican upheaval. I saw a lot of Republicans talking afterwards about different things that Biden should have mentioned, some failures in his speech, how he was highlighting himself in the best way possible rather than focusing on what Americans actually wanted to hear or what their major concerns are. And of course, that is a valid argument, but, every president does the same thing. They all highlight things with their speech, specifically neglect things that don't put their administration in the best light. And so that's what you should normally expect from not only the president, but politicians in general. And then with the fact-checking side of things, I'm going to leave this link down below for you guys to check out yourselves, because this does have a lot in it, and I can't possibly go through all of it right now, nor do I want to, because this is probably the most controversial thing, which isn't supposed to be the most controversial thing, but for yourselves, you can read the statement up here. That'll probably get a reaction out of a lot of people. But thank you for watching, thank you for listening, and make sure to come back for more political media coverage and more videos from the Youth Political Activism channel. As always, I'll have all of this stuff linked down below for you guys to check out, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.